Okay, in this video, what I want to do is I want to create an application that's going to be taking advantage of the navigation page. So remember, the page is the top level of how you're going to navigate within your application. So previously we've done some work within the tabbed page. The navigation page is another very common way of moving between pages. So I want to take advantage of the navigation page, as well as I'd like to also show one of the layouts called the grid layout. And this is actually a really nice layout if you want to have a lot of control when it comes to spacing and how things are positioned. So if you've taken HTML and you've used like a table in previous classes, this may be very comfortable to you. So that's what I want to do, is actually take advantage of both of those layouts. So, or the layout in the page. So what I want to do is I just want to open up my Xamarin and I want to start a new project. For this example, I'm just going to create a distance converter. Now, I'm not planning on making the converter actually fully functioning. You definitely can continue on if you wanted to. My main thing for this video is I want to show you how to use navigation, specifically a navigation page, as well as using a grid layout. So we're just going to really work on the user interface portion of this for this specific lab. So I'm going to do an app. It's going to be a cross-platform Xamarin Forms app. I'm going to go next. I'm just going to call this thing Distance Converter. And I'm going to do the edu.fetc. It's going to be for the iPhone and Android portable class library. Same thing that we've been doing. I'm just going to go next here. And that's checked. Everything's underneath the one folder. I'm happy with that, so I'm going to hit create and let it create the form for me. So for this page, I need to be able to navigate between two different views. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to have like a main page that's going to be the main, calculator portion of it. And then I'd like to have an about page. Now I could just put a button that says about and then navigate to the about page, and then automatically the navigation page will handle the back and forth and all of that. But instead of just doing a button, that would be really easy, and I know you guys can do buttons and click events. What I'd like to do is actually use a toolbar button. It's a little bit different. I think that might be a good approach for this specific app. So I'm going to open up my portable class library, and I'm just going to create a folder just to kind of keep things a little bit organized here. I'm going to add a new folder. I'm just going to call it Views. And then within the Views folder, I'm just going to add a new file. I'm going to do exactly the same thing we've been doing by creating a Forms and a XAML. And then I'm just going to call this thing Distance Page. So I've got my distance page, which is my main page, my start page, my landing page. So this is going to be the main calculator is going to be my distance page. So I'm just going to create that. And what I want to do is I want to go to my main app. So if the portable class library is called Distance Converter, my app is also called Distance Converter. So if I open this up, I've got this code here. And I can just delete this out. So I've got my main page, and then what I want to do is I want to go to my distance. Oops, distance page. Okay, so we've been doing this all along, where we're now saying the distance page is going to be my starting page because that's what I made the main page equal to. What I can do is I can actually set the distance page equal to a navigation page. And that's what I really want to do here. So, and actually I forgot the new anyways. That really would have been bad. Okay, so that's what we've been doing, where we're saying it's equal to a new instance of the distance page. So what I want to do is I'm going to make it equal to a new instance of the navigation page, if I do an open paren, one of the things the navigation page is looking for is what is going to be the root page, the first page. So the root page is going to be our new distance page. Then I'm just going to close that up. So basically what I'm doing is I'm nesting the distance page inside our navigation page. So the main page is going to get a navigation page, and then automatically it's going to shove the distance page inside the navigation page. So if I just run this, I mean, we're going to be looking at a white form, but at least you'll be able to hopefully see the navigation bar at the top. Okay, so you can see that we've got the bar up here. So I can actually put a title up there. But what I want to do is I want to put a title up there, but I also want to put a button, like in the upper right corner. And that's something you often see, like create new customer, log in, add items. You have buttons up in this area up inside the toolbar, and that's what I want to do. So I want to make a toolbar item, which is a button, and I want to be able to have it say about. If I click on it, I want to go to the About Us page. So that's where I'm headed. So I'm just going to stop for now, and underneath my views, I'm going to add a new view. So I'm going to go View, right click Add, and I want to do a new file, and I'm going to do a Forms. I'm going to do a content page that's XAML, and I'm just going to say About Page. I'm going to say New there. And my About Page, I'm going to add some padding in here. So I'm just going to bring this down so that way you guys can see all of the attributes of my content page. So I'm just going to add one more attribute here that's going to be padding. And then the padding is going to, I'm just going to do my 20-20-20. 20. So I'm just going to add padding all the way around. And then in here, my content page, I'm just going to put in a label that has text. It's going to say, I don't know, about me. So you can do whatever you want here. I'm going to make the font size large. I'm going to X-align that to be center. And actually, I'm going to bump that down a little bit more than 20. I'm going to make it like 50. I'm just going to bring it down a little bit. So in the center, it'll say About Me. You could do whatever you want. You could throw, a stack layout in there, or whatever. But for right now, I'm just trying to get a page that we can navigate to. So I don't want to necessarily fall in love with this page. I want a page that when I hit the button, we can navigate to it. So at this point, I'm just going to save this. Oops. Okay, so if you looked at the iPhone up here, we had our navigation bar, but there was no text in there. So right now I'm on the About page. If I go to the code behind of the About CS, on the main constructor here, initializing components, I can actually set a title. And I can make that title say, About about me or whatever. So that's how you actually set the text that's appearing in this area. So I'm just going to save that. I'm going to close the about down for now because I think I've got a very simple page, but it's good enough for now. Okay, so my distance converter here, my main app, I'm using a navigation, and then I'm throwing a new instance of the distance page inside the navigation page. That's really all the work I'm going to do with this page as well. So I'm just going to close that class down. Now my distance page, I don't have any content in it. If I go to the code behind on that, I just want to throw a title in there as well. And I'm just going to give the title a name of like distance converter. Okay, so I've got my distance converter. I'm just going to run this for right now and just make sure that everything's working the way I want it to. Basically making sure there's no compilation errors or mistyping. So now I see distance converter here. Now I can't get to the about page. I do have it made, but I need some form of navigation to get me there. I could throw a button on here. On the click event of the button, we can navigate there, or I could do the toolbar. And the toolbar is a little bit more complex, but I think it's a little cooler, so I'm going to do that. And I think you guys, after doing the toolbar, could easily figure out how to just do a click event on a button. So I'm just going to do it right within that main constructor here. I want to just create a new toolbar item is the class that we need. So I'm just going to start typing in toolbar item. So I'm just going to call it TBI for toolbar item. I'm just going to make a new instance of that class. Okay, so I have two different things that I really could do within that toolbar item. I could set up an image, which is an icon, so I could throw a little picture up in that toolbar. So sometimes you see like a plus symbol if you want to add a record or something like that. Otherwise, if I wanted to, I could add text. And just for simplicity, I'm just going to add text, and to be honest, text actually looks good anyway, so I'm just going to say about. Okay, so my toolbar item now has some text in it, and what I want to do is I want to make a click event in the toolbar item, so I'm going to do the tbi.clicked. So there's an event. So what I can do is I can set a delegate, and if somebody clicks on this toolbar, now I can actually move that new page over. So if I wanted to do that, I need to use navigation, and this class is available to me because it's now inside of a navigation page. So that gives us the ability to tap into that navigation controller. And I want to push. And I want to push a new instance of the about page. So, okay, so there's two main things that you can do with the navigation. Well, actually, there's a couple, but the two main ones that I really want you to get is the push and the pop. All right. So the navigation's nothing but a queue, and with a queue, you can push items onto the queue, or you can pop items off the queue. So I always think of a queue very simple, similar to a stack of plates when you go to like a buffet or something, and they've got like the spring-loaded plates, and you need to pop one off. So if somebody's washing the plates, they're pushing plates on. So the last plate that was pushed on is at the top of the queue. That's the one that you visually can see. So when you're pushing something onto a queue, that's what's being visually displayed. If somebody pops a plate off of that stack, it's popping it off, and they walk away with it, and you can't see it anymore. So that's the push and the pop. So those are going to be the two main things that you're going to tap into. And since I want to display this one, I'm pushing it onto the navigation stack. Okay, so I've got my push async. I've got that all wired up. Now I need to actually add this toolbar item to the right side of the thing. So I'm just going to say this page has toolbar items, and I just want to add, and I want to add my toolbar item is called TBI. Okay, so I think this should be good. I should now have an about. So I'm just going to run this. Okay, so up here you can see I have the about. I could have done an icon, made a little image and put that up there, which works exactly like the images on the tabs. So it's that same deal. So I see navigation, or I'm sorry, distance converter. And if I click on the about, see the about me, I see about me. Automatically it wires in that back, so that comes for free. So that navigation's just built right in. So that's the navigation control. It's really easy. You can just put buttons, you click the buttons. And if we just did a click event on a button, all you have to do is use this navigation.push async. You can use the navigation push or pop async anywhere as long as the pages are children of that navigation page. And it's a child of the navigation page because when we did this here, navigation page is our top level, and then we're throwing that distance page as a child of the navigation page. So from the distance page, we're saying move away from distance page, go to the about page, but the about page is still underneath that navigation. So we can move around in this world without any problem, and that navigation page handles all of the controlling and moving around without any problem. So that's really the navigation page, and that works really easy. It's a good way of doing it. People are comfortable and used to that type of navigation on an iPhone. So I do want to go deeper into the layout, and the layout that I really want to drive into is this distance page. So I want to get into the grid, and the grid is a little bit different. So let's just jump in and start using it. So I'm just going to go in between my content tags here. And, well, before I get that far, let's add a little bit of padding. So I'm just going to tab this over so that way we can see the namespace and the class and all that. And I'm just going to add some padding here. And I'm just going to use the normal 2020. Okay, so I've got my padding in place. I'm going to use a grid tag. I've got my closing grid tag. So grids are basically columns and rows, just like a spreadsheet. I can have multiple columns, I can have multiple rows, I can define each column differently, each row differently. So the way I'm planning on laying this out is I want to have some type of an interface that's going to be like let's just say meters. So if you think about the user interface, I want to have like a label that says meters, and then over a little bit over here I want to have some type of an input box where they can type in how many meters it is. So that's going to be an entry, the text box. So I want to have a text box, and I want to have a label. and I want to have it so that way I can have spacing in there, so that way maybe, I don't know, what's the next one, like inches. Um, and then I can have my next input box here, and I want to be able to have control between like how much space is between these. I can now have more space, or if I wanted to pull them closer together, I could do that. If I wanted to, say I wanted it to, maybe be this far apart, I can have that control. So that's the way we're going to do this. So if I wanted to control how far from the top, there's actually going to be a row there. That's going to be my 0 row. And then maybe I could say that's going to be like 10 pixels. And that 10 pixels will give me 10 pixels from the top. And then this one here, I could say I want it to be, 30 pixels, 20 pixels, or maybe I can say I want it to automatically adjust to the size of the largest item. So if I had, here inches and, meters are very, very similar, but maybe I have something that's a little bit longer. Um, so something like kilometers. So this one here is going to be longer. So I want everything to line up. So how many spaces is this? 1, 2. So if I did 1, 2, and then through, so I don't want it like that. So I could say this column will automatically adjust to the longest item in there, and then it would do that. So it would automatically adjust. So I really have a couple options. I can say, now specifically here, when I'm dealing with this column, I could say I want it to be so many pixels long, but then I need to figure out what the longest one is. So if I do auto, it will automatically figure out what the longest one is. There's another one that's the wild card, the star. So like, let's say I've got this side of the phone here. I don't know, maybe the phone actually, the screen, you know, ends here. So I've got all of this space here. So I could say I want the second column, which actually would be column 1, because it goes column 0, column 1. I could say I want that to be 20 pixels, 40 pixels, which is fine. But I could also use a star. And the star will say, instead of just making this hard-coded or automatically to the size of the entry, I could say, well, we're going to take up all of this space. We're going to take up all of the remaining spaces with my input. So that's really what we're doing, is we're trying to save my columns and my rows. So like for example, the row also has a height. How high do I want to make this? So I could say, okay, well, if the label is using large text, use auto and it'll automatically fit that. Or small text, it'll automatically fit that. I could hard code a certain certain pixel in there, or I could use the star, to take up whatever space is left and spread these out equally. So that's what we're going to do. So inside the grid, I'm just going to delete this out. I was just using that to talk. I need to really start to define this stuff. So what I want to do is I'm just going to do a couple rows to start with. The first thing I need to do is set up my column definitions. So within a grid, I have columns and rows. So I've got my grid tag, and then inside here, I'm going to say grid dot. Now IntelliSense here would be nice. I'm going to type in column definitions. Okay, so and that is plural because there's multiple columns. We can have many columns in here. Now inside of here, now I'm going to set up my column definition. All right, so I'm going to do a new tag that's going to be called not column definitions. It's just going to be column definition. And for the column, we're really dealing with the width of a column. That's the only thing we can really control is our width. And this is that first column. We could set that up to be, 100 pixels. We could set it up to be a star, meaning it's going to take up the entire screen. Matter of fact, let's just do that to start with. I'm going to make that equal to a star. So this column is going to be the entire screen. So this is going to be my column 0. So if I copy this, and paste it right below, now I've got two column definitions, both taking up the entire screen. So what it's going to do is it's going to split it in half. So now half the screen from here to here is going to be my first column, and then the other half is my second column. So the star will just split it 50-50. So 50% of the screen is going to be column 0. The second half of the screen is going to be column 1. And actually, if I wanted to, I could split it into thirds as well. So if I throw another one on there, now it's going to be 1/3 of the screen is going to be, this is going to be a 0. Then the second third of the screen here is going to be my 1. And then the last third is going to be my 2. So it's going to be 0, 1, 2. Now, what I want to do is I want to have a label in here, and my label is going to say like millimeters and inches and miles and all of that. So I'm going to have a label in here, and then I want to have the rest of that screen be an entry, an actual text box. So for me, I really want to have 2 columns, not 3. So I'm just going to delete one of these columns off. In the first column, which is my 0 column, I want that to be auto. And the auto means just automatically fit whatever the largest label is. So if I have a label that is like kilometers or kilometers or whatever, that whatever the largest text is, it will automatically adjust that column to the largest width. Okay, so I've got my columns. I've got 2 columns. One's going to be whatever the largest one is. It's going to automatically fit all of them to the largest one. And then whatever is left over on the right-hand side, we're going to take up that entire space with, whatever's in there. Now, in our case, it's going to be an entry. So, okay, so I've got my column definitions. Now I need to do the same thing again, but this time for my row definition. So I'm going to do the same thing where I'm going to do my grid. And then I'm going to tap into the row definitions. It's going to put a space in here so that way you can see. So I've got my grid definitions, and then I've got my row definitions. And then the same thing here, I'm going to need to set each definition. So for each row. So I've got my row definition. Now this time the attribute isn't going to be my width, because my row width is just being handled through the column. So the only thing I care about for my row is the height. So I can actually set my height up to be whatever I want. So let's just say I'm going to give it 10 additional padding from the top. So I want it to go down 10 pixels. So I'm just going to throw a string of 10. So this is going to be my very first row. So that's my row 0. So I'm going to just copy this. And I'm going to paste it a couple of times here. I'm just going to do it like that. So I've got 4 of them, and then I'm going to do auto 10 auto. And I'm going to play around with this a little bit just so that way you can kind of get a feel for how this is going to work. So at this point in time, I've got my column definition set up and I've got my row definition set up. Now, while I'm still inside the grid, now I'm going to start putting my controls on the screen. So if I wanted to, I can just say I'm going to start with a label. And it's going to be text. Oh, before I do the text, I want to set my row and my column up. So I've got my first row, which is 10. This row is my 0. I'm going to set that actually I'm going to do this as a comment. Just that way you can kind of see what I'm doing here. I'm going to I'm in XAML. That's why. I'd actually have to use HTML comments if I wanted to. If you're curious, it's more work than it's worth for me. But it's a less than, exclamation point, dash dash, and then I can do a 0, and then it's a dash dash greater than. So that's an HTML comment. I guess it's not that much more work. This is not required. I'm just trying to explain what's going on here. So I've got my 0, my 1, my 2, my 3. So those are each one of the rows. So the first row, I'm just giving myself 10 more additional pads. So really, I could bump this up to 30 and blow away this one here. But I'm just saying, I'm going down 20. I'm kicking it down another 10. I don't have to. But my label here is going to be this auto one. All right, so for here, I just want to set up my grid row. So my label has grid dot row. And my grid row is going to be row 1. So this is going to be my first label. And then I also have a column. So I've got column here. My column has a 0. And it has a 1. So I actually have 2 columns as well. So I'm going to go grid, column, and this is going to be my 0 column. And then what I want to do is I'm going to do text. And I'm going to make that equal to meters. And then I'm just going to close that. So then what I want to do is I want to do an entry. So I'm copying my row and my grid. Now, my row and my column. But now instead of being in column 0, I want to move this over to column 1. So that's going to be the remainder of this space. If I put them both in, row 1, column 0, it would put the label in there, but then it would slam the input box right on top of the label. Okay, so for this one, I want to give it a name so that way I can interact with it. And I'm just going to call this thing txt meters. And then I'm just going to close that up. So 0 was space above this. Now we're on 1. We're saying whatever the height is on the row. So I've got my label and I've got my entry. So this is going to be my 1. 2, I'm just giving myself another 10 pixels of spacing. So now I'm going to do 3 here. So I'm actually going to copy both of these. And then I'm just going to paste it below. So instead of dealing with row 1 or 2, I'm going to jump to 3. So 0 spacing, 1 exists, 2 spacing, 3 exists. So I've got my 0, I've got my 1. I'm just going to make this inches. Then I'm going to make that txt inches. So I'm just going to run this and see if everything's working out. So you can see that my meters. So I've got my 20 pixels. I've got my 20 pixels. Got my 20 pixels, but then I'm adding another 10 on that. So that's that first row. So we really can't see the first row, and we can't see, well, 0, row, 1 we can see, 2 we can't, 3 we can see. So just to try to show more of why we're doing what we're doing here. So these two have a little bit of space between them, and that's nice. If we wanted to, I could say I want it to be 50 pixels. So if I stop that and run it again, it'll make it more obvious. So now we've got a lot of space between it. So it gives us that control. And if I really wanted to, I could have put another column in between so that way I could actually control the gap between the largest word and the input box. But that, I don't think that's necessary. This is normally what I do. And the main reason that I do it is because if I did not use a grid, I'm just going to put it to 0 pixels for right now, just so that way you could see what would happen if this was not in a grid. And a lot of people do this as well, but to me it makes everything really, really tight. So when you're dealing with fat fingers and you're trying to get in between here, things are just really crammed together. So by using a grid, it does give me the ability to say I want 10 pixels here, maybe 20 pixels there. Especially like I'm going to have buttons, I can actually put more spacing in and do that. So it just kind of like lays things out. So the main thing I'm trying to do is just get you a general idea of how this works. I'm just going to do a couple more here just to give you, an example. So I don't need the comments. I'm just going to leave those comments in there. But I'm going to do the same thing here again. I want to have 10 pixels of spacing. Because I'm going to add feet. That's going to be my next one. So I've got my spacing, and then I've got my label and my entry. So I've got meters, I've got inches. Just going to copy this and paste below. So I've got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. This one's going to be 5. So I've got 5 and 5. So 3 is my inches, 4 is that 10 pixels of spacing, 5 is now going to be my feet. If I run that, so now in a real app I would continue doing, more of these like yards and miles and whatever. But I do want to do buttons in here. And it would be nice if I could do it so that way I'd have two different buttons, one for a clear and one for a convert. And I'd like to actually have them, instead of being up and down like this, have them be side to side. But the problem is I've got two columns. So with two columns, I don't want to have like the convert button be really small and the clear button to be really big. So I'm going to show you how I would deal with that type of a situation. We have the ability to actually span across both columns. So I can make, instead of having two separate columns, I can say this row, this next row, we're going to make it into one big column. That's where I'm going to go with this. Okay, so I'm going to come down here because I want to do my next one. So I'm just going to copy both of these rows. And since this is going to be like my convert kind of button, I'm going to push it down a little bit more. So instead of 10 pixels, I'm just going to go 60 pixels. And I can play with that if it's too low. I just want to kind of separate it out and kind of give that its own area. Okay, so 5, 6 is my spacing, and then I've got 7. So my 7 is going to be my auto here. So for my row 7, I'm going to use a stack layout. So you can actually mix and match stack layouts and grids and scroll views. So I'm just going to use my stack layout, and I'm going to set up my rows and my columns. So 5, 6, 7 is my next one. Column, I want to always start at 0 because I want to say from the beginning, and what I want to do is I want to do a column span, and I want to span both column 0 and 1. So my column span is going to be equal to 2. So it's going to be grid dot column span, and I'm going to make that equal to 2. So at this point, I've got a stack layout. I'm just going to close that, give myself a little bit of space. So I've got my stack layout, and I want to put two buttons in here, but I want the buttons to really be evenly spaced, and I'd like them to both be horizontal. So within my stack layout, I'm actually going to do my orientation being horizontal, so that way they can be in there. It'd be nice to have IntelliSense. Alright, so my orientation's horizontal. And then what I want to do is I actually want to use the horizontal option to fill. I want to make this stack layout fill the entire span of both cells. So the horizontal options is going to be fill. So I'm just going to pop up the simulator for 1 second so that way you can. So basically what I've done is I've said, all right, from the bottom of this one, go down 60 pixels, so I'm down here. So I've got column 1 and column 2. I put a stack layout in here, and I said I want it to span both columns, and I want you to take the entire space. So instead of just taking up the space of a button, I want to make sure that it takes up the entire space within the screen here. So that's what the fill does. So now what I can do is I can add my buttons in here. So in my stack layout, I'm just going to pull this over so that way hopefully you can see the code that I've got written. Okay, so I'm going to throw in 2 buttons. So I'm going to do a button. I'm not really going to wire the buttons up. I'm really just going to look at getting the graphical part of this down. Text. Okay, so my first button is going to be my clear button. And I'm going to set up horizontal options here. So the horizontal options, I'm going to fill and expand. Fill and expand. So now this specific button is going to take up the entire stack layout, because the stack layout is saying fill to the parent, and the parent is going to be the phone. So actually, let's just run this really quick, so that way. So I've got a stack layout. That's horizontal, that's fill, and then my button is fill and expand. So notice how this here is the entire screen, and my button is filling the entire child, which centers that text in there. So I can click anywhere in here and that click button is, or the clear button is firing off. So that button is expanding. Okay, so I want to do another button just like that. So I'm just going to copy it and paste that. So instead of having it be clear, now it's going to be convert. And now if I run that, so both of them are fill and expand. So it's kind of like before when I had both of the columns being stars, it just split it 50-50, and that's exactly what this is going to do, the fill and expand. So it's going to say, okay, well, half of it's going to be the clear, half of it's going to be the convert. So if I run it right down the middle here, if I lean a little bit to the right, the convert's going. But if I take it a little bit to the left, the clear goes. So kind of cool. So that's the way I would do this. I would, now obviously, for real app, I'd continue doing more, going down. But this is really what I wanted to show. I wanted to show how to do a layout here that's a grid, and then you could also do a stack layout inside the stack layout. So as I'm sitting here talking and thinking about it, you could have a lot of controls on here. And if you had a ton of controls on here, it would be nice to be able to make that screen scroll, so that way you could just drag it with your finger and move up and down. So a scroll view is actually really, really simple to implement. So a content page, or a page in general, expects one specific view. So we are dealing with, or one specific layout, we're dealing with a grid layout. So the page is getting a grid layout. Now nested inside that grid layout, we do have a grid, but we also have a stack layout. So you can nest this stuff. The main thing is the page is expecting one layout to be returned. Well, there's also a scroll view. The scroll layout, so if I do a scroll view, alright, so that's my scroll view. Now at this point I'd have a problem, because I'm returning 2 layouts. I've got my scroll view and my grid. But if I wrap my scroll view around the grid, I'm just going to go to the bottom of my grid here, and then put my closing scroll view. Now it's actually only going to be returning a scroll view, and then nested inside the scroll view is going to be a grid, and then inside the grid is going to be my stack layout. But it's only getting a scroll view that it needs to render inside the page. So if I were to rerun this, I've now enabled myself to throw as many controls on this page as I want. I can continue up with inches, miles, feet. It's not working because I don't have enough on here. But if I were to really load this up, that scroll view gives me the ability just to scroll up and down. So if I had a lot of data in here, that's how a scroll view works. It's a very simple layout that we can take advantage of. So anyways, hopefully this video helps you get a really good understanding of both the navigation control and also the toolbar item up here, as well as the grid. So hopefully you enjoyed the video.